Start letting people in.
Okay, letting them in.
Aloha, everyone. Nice to see you all. Feel free to go ahead and put in the chat where you're from while we let everyone in, and we'll get started shortly. So nice to see everyone. Okay, so while we're letting people in, I'm gonna go ahead and make some announcements. So I'm Sean Lether, want to welcome you all to Hawaiian Islands. And I want to welcome everyone who is joining us live on the Conscious Awakening Network. I'd like to make a few announcements before we get started about upcoming events. On the third Tuesday of this month, February 18th, we'll be having our monthly Hawaiian Islands Experiencer Sharing Group. Anyone who has had any spiritually transformative experience, whether it's an NDE, after-death communication, prophetic dreams, or if you're just interested in listening, you're invited to join us. And we will put the link to that in the chat. Also, on this Saturday, February 22nd, we will be honoring and celebrating Black History Month with our third annual The Unity and Oneness of Near-Death and Related Experiences. We'll be featuring Chris Batts, who's an amazing speaker that you guys have possibly heard before, and Lashai Barnes Butler and Yandea L. And they're all going to be sharing their NDEs and other spiritually transformative experiences. And I will be sending out the details this week for that. So for details for that event and all of our events, including the sharing group, if you click on the top right of the newsletter that we're going to stick in the chat, you can subscribe to the newsletter and then you'll get notified of those events. This event will be recorded and you can watch a replay on our Hawaiian Islands YouTube channel. Please, if you are not subscribed to the channel, take a quick moment and subscribe, which is www.youtube.com/Hawaiian Islands. Lastly, I want to remind you that these events are a labor of love, and it's very important that we keep them free. Your generosity helps keep all of our events free and support sharing the wisdom and love of NDEs and SDEs with the world. So please donate, partner with us and donate today. You can go to hawaiianislands.com and in the top right, you can click donate, or we'll put a link in the chat. Okay, so got a few people still joining in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Aloha and welcome. I'm Sean Lether. We're excited to be broadcasting live on the Conscious Awakening Network. If you're watching us on YouTube, please make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. I am so thrilled to welcome Tina Louise Spalding, who will share about her extraordinary journey and how 12 years of studying A Course in Miracles and intense forgiveness work led to the spontaneous Kundalini awakening, several out-of-body experiences, and the ability to channel. Tina has been channeling Jesus for 13 years now with the assistance from her guides and teacher, Ananda, and is the author of 9 books and thousands of videos. Jesus, My Autobiography, and A Year of Forgiveness are just 2 of Tina's books that will change your life. To learn more about Tina, you can go to channelingjesus.com. Welcome, Tina.
Oh, thank you. It's lovely to be here. Lovely to have the opportunity to talk about the strange experiences I've had as a result of studying Course in Miracles.
So why don't you share a little bit of your background and what led you to the course? Oh, and also maybe a short definition of the course for people that may not know.
Okay.
And then how it changed your life.
Okay. I was born in 1958 in England to a pretty standard English family, I would say. Not a lot of feelings were expressed, and there was a lot of sort of stiff upper lipness. And I was a good student in school, and I didn't really start getting having difficulty with life until I hit my early teens, and it sort of went downhill from there. I had a really difficult mid-teens, I would say. Before I go into the story of all that, A Course in Miracles is a channel text that is the voice of the Course is Jesus. And when I first picked up the Course, I didn't know that. It came to me through a very sort of circuitous route. And I remember at some point when the voice or the author of the Course says, "At my crucifixion," and I started thinking, hang on a second, who is this that's talking? And I didn't really know that it was Jesus channeling, and I didn't know anything about the Course. I attempted suicide at 17 years old. I had had a inappropriate sexual interaction with a family member that really threw me for a loop, and went into some really disordered thinking and some disordered eating as well. And about 6 months after this event, I attempted suicide. Obviously, I didn't succeed. When I survived that event, I started to make some different decisions, not through any knowledge really of what I was doing, but just this idea that I was now really alive for the first time, I think, in the sense of, oh my goodness, I could not be here. So I went back to university and studied archaeology, something I'd always wanted to do. I had grown up in a spiritualist household, which, as it turns out, is part of my training in this incarnation. So when I was young, I went to lots of seances and channelers and automatic writers, and we would have a seance in our home every Saturday night when I was a kid. So a pretty unusual kind of experience with spirituality. But my mind as a young teenager was very dysfunctional. I had become obsessed with the body and beauty, and the suicide attempt really was an inability to live in my mind anymore, which is what all suicide is. It's a mind that's driving you crazy. So fast forward a little bit, I went back to university, was still having a difficult time living, I would say. Had a couple of marriages. One was very abusive in my early 20s. And in my 30s, I married the father of my 2 children. But that marriage came to an end in my early 40s. And A Course in Miracles came to me at really the worst time in my life. I suppose the suicide attempt was the worst time. This was maybe the second worst time. I had been divorced from my second husband for a year or so. My children were living with him, and I was riddled with guilt and pain about being a failure, basically. I was broke, I was lonely, had 2 failed marriages, and I had been in AA for a year, and my sister and I decided that we would go confront my mother. And this was a big resentment in our lives. And so we confronted our mother and had a very difficult few hours with her. I was scheduled to go up and see my children up in the interior of British Columbia. That's where I live now. And I said to my sister, I said, I can't go by myself. You have to come with me. I was just overwhelmed with this huge fight we'd had. And at the top of the snowy mountain pass that we had to drive up to get there, like 5 or 6 hours in terrible weather, through a mountain pass in Canada, we stopped at the top and we went into Chapter's bookstore. And my sister got back in the car and said, I don't know why I bought this book. You should read it. And it was A Course in Miracles. So it really came to me when I needed it. I was literally on my knees, literally and figuratively. I was guilt-ridden by not being able to look after my kids. I had just had this huge fight with my mother. Nothing was going well. And I started to read A Course in Miracles because it was the book that was given to me. It was Christmas, so I was visiting my sons in their dad's house, and it was kind of an uncomfortable situation. Strange things started happening straight away. As soon as I started to read the Course, I actually felt physical feelings in my head the first evening. And I remember thinking, it was sort of like, I don't know, pinging sensations or something physical was happening. And within a very short time, first of all, as most people, when they pick up the course, they start to read it, they don't understand what it's saying. It's a book that's written in English, but it's very, very difficult to understand when you first pick it up, and you know the individual words, but you have no idea what that sentence just said. But I couldn't stop reading it. And in fact, I ended up reading it without reading anything else for 4 years. It completely became an obsession for me. The first night I read it, I had a dream, which was a prophetic dream. And I dreamt about this little potato guy who lived in space by himself. He was a little lumpy, bumpy guy, and he was lonely and in the dark. And in the dream, the little potato guy thought to himself, I wonder why I have arms, because there's nothing here for me to use my arms for. And he reached out one of his arms and he touched another little potato guy. And where they touched, light shone. And then the next little potato guy reached out his arm, and there was another lonely little potato guy. And the dream was this circle of lonely little potato people in the dark reaching out with their arms, and wherever they touched, light was formed. And of course, I did not know, but that's really what A Course in Miracles is teaching us to do, to reach out to each other, and that's where the light comes from. So that was my first experience of anything weird. I did not attribute it to the book I was reading at the time. I knew nothing about A Course in Miracles. I'd never heard of it. I didn't have a computer at the time. I didn't have a phone at the time. I was in a very isolated time in my life. I had just moved to a remote island. I was done with the world. I didn't want to have anything to do with the world anymore. And I was an artist at the time. And so I had moved to this relatively remote island off the west coast of British Columbia. So I started reading this book every day, and I couldn't put it down. I didn't know what it was. I didn't even research what it was. I just thought, oh, that book I'm reading, I referred to it as that book I'm reading. About 3 weeks into reading the course, I had started the lessons. The first part of the book is a text, a theoretical text upon which these principles are based. The middle part of the book is 365 daily lessons. So I started the lessons, and I had about 3 weeks in, I had an out-of-body experience. I had never had an out-of-body experience. I was a pretty well-read spiritual student. I had read all the Conversations with God books, the Seth books. I'd read all the books that most of us have read. So I knew what an out-of-body experience was. I was laying on my bed and I was actually saying these words, I love you and I trust you. And I was speaking to Jesus. So I had just started the course, figured out that he was the writer, and I was laying on my back and saying these words, I love you and I trust you. My eyes were closed, and my consciousness hurtled up out of my body. And I felt myself go through clouds. My eyes were closed at the time. I was completely awake, completely conscious. And when the movement stopped, I was standing in a spiral galaxy. So I was in the center of this spiral galaxy, and the galaxy was made up of information. And this is what knowledge I was getting in this experience. So it was mathematical symbols, pyramids, triangles, pi signals, math, numbers. And it was just, the information I was given is that this is the universe. It's a universe of information. And then I was shown a stairway going up, and there was a figure silhouetted in a doorway at the top of the stairway. And the person at the top of the stairs said, tell Dave he's overwhelmed and confused. And then I was back in my body, and I knew what it was, an out-of-body experience. And I'm like, tell Dave he's overwhelmed and confused. Like, I knew this guy called Dave. He was just an acquaintance. And so the next day I said to Dave, I said, I had a dream last night that said you were overwhelmed. And I was to tell you were overwhelmed and confused. And he said, oh my God, am I overwhelmed and confused? And that was just kind of a little interaction, didn't seem important at the time. As it turned out, Dave was going to be a really big forgiveness practice for me a few years later. So, as most of us do when we have an amazing spiritual experience, we try to duplicate it. So, the next day, I did exactly the same thing. I laid on the bed and I said, I love you and I trust you. And lo and behold, didn't I have another out of body experience? Exact same experience, this time without the voice, the body silhouetted at the top of the stairs. But once again, I was taken to a spiral galaxy. Nothing in particular happened that time, and then I was back in my body again. And I just remember jumping up and down on my bed and going, "Oh my God, it happened again!" I was by myself. I didn't know anyone where I lived, and I was really riddled with guilt about my children. I had sent my sons to live with their father. I was kind of going under for the third time when that happened, and my kids wanted to go back to their country school. Their father was desolate without them, and I was really having a hard time supporting them as a working artist. And so we all decided that they would go and live with their dad. But I was overcome with guilt and shame, being a bad mother, and just my mind was attacking me terribly. So I continued to study A Course in Miracles. I didn't really have any major revelations until about year 6. Now, if you'd asked me in year 4 or 5 if I was a serious Course in Miracles student, I would have said yes. I read it every day. I took the book with me everywhere. And on Sundays, I would just read the course. That was my going to church, was just reading the course all day. And about year 5, I decided to make some bad decisions as it related to a relationship with a man, and ended up having a terrible year. Basically, my ego took over that year, and I just went into a serious dysfunctional relationship. Long story short, I left the island. I moved to another place. I went to see my sister. I just was hopping around, not knowing where to go and what to do. Now, some people will think, well, year 5 or 6 of doing the course, you shouldn't be doing those kind of crazy things. But I think I always consider that I've been in the remedial class of A Course in Miracles, slow learner. Anyway, after that year of traipsing around the world, not really following the course, I still had it with me, but my ego was in charge that whole year. Dysfunctional relationships being one of my big ego lessons in this lifetime. And I ended up living in a house with 3 crazy women on this island that I went back to after this year of traipsing around following this guy and going to see my sister and getting in a fight with her. And then I realized if I was in a house with 3 crazy women, that I was probably crazy too. So that was kind of a big revelation for me. Anyway, I had a really dark night of the soul in that house. And one evening, I had no money, I had no job. I had just done this year of traipsing around at my ego's behest, and I was in a really bad place. And I was crying and praying all evening. And for any of you that have had a dark night of the soul, you'll know those nights where you have no idea how you're going to continue on. Suicide was always off the table for me because I had attempted it very early on in my life. So that was not an option for me. But I was a good Course in Miracles student at that time. So I was praying the right thing, which was to have my perception healed. So that was my prayer. Please heal my perception so that I can see the truth. And I was crying and praying, getting myself, it was ugly crying. It was the snotty, swollen eye kind of crying. And I was laying on my bed and eyes closed, and my consciousness was lifted out of my body. Now, I say I was lifted, I don't know, 2 or 3 feet above my body. That's what it felt like. And I had this overwhelming experience of oneness, complete forgiveness, complete all-encompassing love, as people who have near-death experiences experience. And it was this, as everyone says, impossible to put into words, just this all-encompassing feeling of love, acceptance, forgiveness, peace, just beyond anything that we experience here on earth. Nothing like what we experience here on earth. And after it felt about 45 minutes, I'm guessing I was out of time, but about 45 minutes into this experience, I said, I'm really tired. You have to put me back now. And so I was laid gently back into my body. And the next morning I woke up and I was in complete peace at that point. And I said to Jesus, because this was what the Course talks about revelatory experiences where you are contacted directly by God. It's not something that you can spend a lot of time in. We're not designed to receive that kind of energy in these bodies in separation. But I said to Jesus in the morning, I said, I will accept anything or any person that you bring me, because I had this experience of all-encompassing oneness. I understood now what the Course was talking about. I'd been studying the Course for 6 years, but didn't truly know what that real world was that Jesus refers to. And so I had this amazing experience of oneness. And it was on that morning that I became a truly dedicated Course in Miracles student. And that morning I had $5 left, $5 to my name. I went to a coffee shop, bought $5 cup of coffee, and was sitting there. And this girl that I knew, she came in and she said, we're looking for someone at work. Can you sew? And I said, yeah, I can sew. She said, we've got a day's work for you. Anyway, so I had just said to Jesus, I'll accept anything you give me. So I went and worked. Anyway, I ended up working there for 2 or 3 years. It was a great little job. And it was something I quite enjoyed, actually. I'd always been a seamstress when I was younger. So I kept studying the Course, but I was much more serious now. And I would have these sensations that I call the Holy Spirit contacting me. And it could be when I was falling asleep. It could be when I was meditating, but it would be this sort of tingly kind of all over body feeling, like pins and needles almost, but had a different quality to it. And I would always take that as a message that what was happening was important. Either the thing I was praying about was important. So let me think now what the next part of the story is. I just always had A Course in Miracles with me. People started to notice this. And I would, on the small island where I lived, going to a coffee shop was kind of the only thing to do. There are not really any other activities. And I always had this book on my table, always reading it. And so sometimes people would come up and go, oh, I've done A Course in Miracles. And I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And I started to, with the people I worked with, I started to teach A Course in Miracles, but I translated it completely. I never used the word God. I never used the word Jesus. I never used the word Holy Spirit, but I would start to see myself as teaching A Course in Miracles. And again, this was my whole being. This Course in Miracles thing was that was the only thing I was interested in. That and my art is what I was interested in. And so 6 years was when I had the revelatory experience. And about year 10, I started to think I'm meant to teach A Course in Miracles, because people don't need to suffer, but they don't know they don't need to suffer. Because as I went through this decade of doing the Course, I started to be happier. I started to understand that I was the liability, my mind, the way I was thinking, that I was causing my own suffering. So it was this growing awareness through this decade of studying A Course in Miracles and doing forgiveness practice. So the main forgiveness practice I had during that period was my sister. I have a younger sister, and we had been very, very, had a very, very rocky relationship. About 4 years before the feeling that I needed to teach, she had got into an abusive relationship with a boyfriend. I hadn't talked to her for years. I had a dream that my life was going to be turned upside down by a tidal wave. And she contacted me by email the next morning and said, my boyfriend's trying to kill me. I don't know what to do. And I had had the feeling for a month or so that family stuff was going to come up. So I was starting to get these intuitions, these guidances through the study of A Course in Miracles, which happens as you calm your mind through your forgiveness practice. You start to get these intuitive hits. You start to understand more about listening to guidance. I wasn't having any direct contact with my guides and teachers at that point, but the dream obviously was a heads up. There's a tidal wave heading your way, and it was my sister. So she came, I went and picked her up. She couldn't believe it. She's like, we don't talk. And I said, well, I'm doing this book called A Course in Miracles. And It's part of my forgiveness practice. Anyway, 2 or 3 years down the line, we're at each other's throats again. And it was just an intolerable situation. Everything she did annoyed me. Everything I did annoyed her. And it was one of these relationships that was just seemed to be insolvable, even though I had this forgiveness practice. So I had another dark night of the soul where I said, I cannot live on my island with my sister. I can't do it. I simply do not want to live. It's a very small place, 2 coffee shops, nowhere else to go. And it felt like I had lost this place that had been quote unquote mine. It wasn't mine, obviously, but she'd shown up and now my peace was destroyed. And so I had another dark night of the soul. And these revelatory experiences seem to happen to me when I am on my knees in a prayerful, devastated, sad state. So I had another dark night of the soul. I was crying and praying again, please transform I knew it was me. By this point, I'm 10 years into the course. I know the problem is me. I know it's judgment. I know it's a resentment. I don't know how to fix it. And at the end of that evening, I had the first real vision I had, and a voice for the first time. So the vision I was shown, this was after another 2 or 3 hours of crying and praying, was an English village. And the English villages are very iconic. They're very easy to recognize. I'm originally English. And it was an English village with a church spire and cottages. And over this village, there was a cobweb covering everything. And this voice said to me, these hateful thoughts that you have in your mind are just like the cobweb. They're contaminating every aspect of your life. So that was the first time I heard Ananda. I didn't know who it was, but it was a very clear voice. It said, you have to get rid of these thoughts. So the 2 thoughts were that I'm ugly, and the other thought is that I'm unlovable. And the next morning, again, I got up and decided to leave the island. So I did. I left the island. But I was in a complete state of peace again. This information that had been given to me refocused my mind onto my mind, not on her. It was telling me that the problem was in me. And as a Course in Miracles student, I knew it. I knew that it was coming from me. So I moved from this island to Victoria, which is a town. I was going to school. I was studying digital graphic design, and I had been commuting, which was awful. And so I rented an apartment for 6 months from this lady. And she had this amazing library of books on Kundalini awakenings and Tantra. I would never have bought these books. It was not a subject I was particularly interested in, but I was in this apartment through an amazing series of synchronicities. And so I started reading these books, not really thinking anything of it. I came to the end of my school, and when I graduated, well, just before I graduated, I had decided I was tired of being broke. I was tired of all this spiritual business. It wasn't helping me any, although it was really. I was much happier. I was much clearer. I was in less suffering. But it was financial. I was broke, and I was like, I got to get a job. So I decided that I was going to get a job designing websites. That's what the 2-year program that I was in was about. But we started about 2 months before the end of school doing resumes. And as soon as I started doing resumes, I was like, I can't get a job. I'm unemployable. I've been free. I was working as an artist. I'd been free too much. There was no way I could get an office job. Anyway, I just started to design a set of tarot cards, and I would pray as I would do these tarot cards that I wanted a creative and spiritual job. And that was as specific as I got. But every time I sat down to create these tarot cards, I would pray to Jesus. I want a creative and spiritual job, because I knew I couldn't work in an office. I'd done it in my 20s, and I was unemployable by this stage. I was 52 at that point. I'd had 10 years from the second divorce through the Course in Miracles studies. But still, I was, ego was strong still in me. I was financially broke. And anyway, I graduated from that class, and basically I was off the next day. I just graduated, and I laid down for a nap. I need to go back a little bit. When I went to Victoria, the 6 months that I was in Victoria, I decided after this vision I'd had about the English village that I had to get my resentment of my sister out of my mind. And so for 6 months, my prayers were about getting her out of my mind and getting out of this resentment that I had with her. She kept showing up in my mind all the time. And so my prayer was, I release this relationship to the Holy Spirit so we can both be free. Please transform my mind so I can see the truth. And these were the prayers I would say anytime my ego wanted to attack her, it was constant. This resentment was constant in my mind. And so I dedicated 6 months to this intense forgiveness practice. And I would suggest any of you that have someone that lurks in your mind that you know is your forgiveness practice, these are 2 amazing prayers. I hand this relationship over to the Holy Spirit so we can both be free, because neither of you are free when there's a resentment. And please transform my perception so I can see the truth. So I was doing this. I was doing walking meditations. I was doing it before bed. Anytime I could do that, I was saying these prayers. I was becoming intensely focused on forgiving this relationship. So when I laid down for a nap the day after I graduated, it happened to be June 21st, 2012. It was the summer solstice of 2012. This ball of energy appeared at the bottom of my spine. Now, I had been in this apartment reading these books on Kundalini awakenings and Tantra. So I had kind of educated myself on the kind of energies that were at play with Kundalini awakenings. So I felt this ball of energy. So I was just laying on my couch in my apartment. And I thought, oh, whoa, what's happening? And this ball of energy started to move up my back. I would say the ball of energy was like this size, 5-6 inches across. And as the ball of energy started to move up my back, my body started to move spontaneously. My arms were moving, my spine was arching, and I was in an absolute state of ecstasy. It was unbelievable. It was pure ecstasy. I can't use any other word. I always figure, though, if someone had seen what was happening, they probably thought I was having a grand mal seizure of some kind, because my body was just moving spontaneously. So this ball of energy moved up my spine. I figure it took about 15 or 20 minutes to move up my spine. And then it burst out at the top of my head in what I call a full body orgasm. It was not an orgasm that was located in any one region. It was my entire body was in a state of orgasmic ecstasy. Then the ball of energy went back down to the bottom of my spine again. And the same thing happened. I was doing spontaneous mudras as I was laying there, but I was completely surrendered. I knew what was happening. I knew this was a Kundalini experience. And I knew for 6 months I had been praying so intensively. And in these books that I had read, it was very clear that Kundalini experiences are often spontaneously caused by intense mental focus. So this is why yogis do asanas. They are seeking this transformation of consciousness that comes from intense mental focus. So the discursive mind, the monkey mind, is the thing that stops us from reaching these levels of ecstasy. So anyway, the ball is at the bottom of my spine. It goes up my back again. Now it bursts out different chakras front and back. And each time I have this full body orgasm, ecstatic experience. It does it a third time. So the ball of energy goes to the bottom of my spine again, and again it goes up, and it's bursting out of different chakras. And as this was happening, I could feel that my entire body was being scanned. Something or someone was, you know how in sci-fi movies they have those lights that go across things to scan them. That's exactly what it felt like. And it was as if some entity or intelligence was registering everything about my nervous system, about my body, how it functioned, everything. Now, I'm going to swear here because that's what happened in real life. At the end of that third round of ecstatic energy work, I would say it took about an hour and a half, something like that, for this to happen 3 times. I sat up and I went, holy fuck. And that is exactly what it felt like. It felt, and that's why my first book is called Making Love to God. I actually wanted to call it Holy Fuck, but my publisher wouldn't let me. And that is what it felt like. It felt like I had been made love to by God. That's what it felt like. It was unbelievable. Now, how do you tell anyone about this? I didn't have any spiritual community. I just had been a mature student at school. I tried to tell one woman about it, and that I had been kind of acquaintance with, and she was, it was too much. She didn't understand what I was talking about. So what happened next was a really amazing few months. So I knew that I'd had a Kundalini awakening. And this ecstatic experience happened every single time I laid down for 3.5 weeks. So for 3.5 weeks, I was in a completely altered state of consciousness. I was often in many orgasms happened. No bodies were being touched. It was all energy work. And so at the end of 3.5 weeks, as I said, I was completely surrendered to this experience because of my experience with the Course, knowing that I had been working closely with Jesus for 12 years now at that point, and because I had read these books on Kundalini awakenings, I was completely surrendered to this experience and immensely curious about what this was. So I allowed it to transpire for about 3.5 weeks, and about 3.5 weeks in, I had this feeling that someone wanted to say something. So I had not had any verbal communication at this point. I didn't know it was going to lead to channeling. I had written to a channeler on the island I lived on, and I told her what was happening. And she said, well, we're doing a automatic writing workshop. Why don't you come and we'll see if we can find out what this or who this is. So I got in my Jeep. I had a beautiful convertible Jeep Wrangler at that point, and I drove to Salt Spring Island. It was middle of summer. The top was down. I was listening to Van Halen or something. I was like so high. I'd been for 3.5 weeks.
Did we lose Tina?
Yeah, I think we lost Tina. Everybody just hold tight. I think she'll realize maybe she lost power. So hold tight.
Or she's having another Kundalini awakening and blew out her in and out.
You're texting her, Sean?
Yeah.
Okay.
While we're rating, how many people know what A Course in Miracles is? If you know how to raise your hand, your Zoom hand down under reactions, it would just be interesting to see how many people know of the Course.
I think she's popped back in. Let me see.
You see her?
I saw her come up to admit for her to come in.
Yeah, I added her. Now I'm looking in the whole. Let me find her in the.
So how many people is that with their hands up? 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
Can you hear me now?
About 19.
Yes.
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, this is the second time this has happened where I'm telling the story and my computer shuts down. Just so you know, I'm on my phone now.
I am not surprised.
Yeah, there's a lot of energy, and who knows if there's any interference going on. I think sometimes there is interference. We've had interference at retreats like this where technological problems happen. So it was just at that critical moment too, wasn't
That's
it?
why I have the backup
Yeah.
computer. I'm used
So
to
I apologize
stuff like that
but
happening.
that's just whoever or whatever is messing with us is at it again. So I'll get back to the story. So I took my Jeep. I love my
Oh, wait,
Jeep.
just a sec, Tina. I just
Yeah.
wanted you to see how many people, I had everybody raise their hand, whoever knows of the Course. Because I just wanted to see how many know. And you guys can lower your hands and we'll talk more about the course, what it is later. But I was just curious how many knew of it. Okay, so back to the story.
So I get in my Jeep, I'm listening to rock and roll, I'm high as a kite, no drugs or alcohol were involved. It was just this orgasmic energy. So I arrived at the retreat. There was about 20 people, and it was a Friday night. And so we had our pens and we had our little candles we were focusing on, and my hand started to move. I'd never done any automatic writing before. I knew what it was. I'd seen other people do it. And I started to just scribble, and then it got more and more like handwriting. And then I started to write this word, Ananda, Ananda. So it's really good to know, because we all went Ananda. We kind of have heard that, Yogananda. All of these Indian teachers have Ananda in their name, right? Well, Sat Chit Ananda, Ananda actually means bliss in Sanskrit. And so that is the experience I had been having. I've been having this experience of Ananda, this blissful experience. And we looked at it and we're like, Ananda, Ananda. We didn't really know. Someone said, oh, the Buddha's favorite student was called Ananda. So we knew that it was an Indian name. So that was kind of it. And then it was bedtime and everyone went to their rooms. And I was up by myself, sitting at the kitchen bar, and there was a light. And then I had the feeling someone wants to say something again. I was like, okay, don't ask me what that feeling is, just someone wants to say something. And so I started to write again, and the writing read, we are Ananda, we are your guides and teachers. We are going to write books through you. This is now your life's purpose. And they also wrote that I had been alive in Jesus' time, and that I had been a teenage goat herder, and that I had followed Jesus when he was teaching, and that I would sit around the fire at night, and that he and I had become friends, and that he would teach me. Now, I did not know that I would end up channeling him, but that was what Ananda told me when they first made contact. And so that was amazing. I, again, was totally surrendered to this. I knew that I was like, okay, I've won the spiritual jackpot here. I'm channeling. Oh my God. Like, I'd always loved channeled material. I'd always listened to Esther Hicks and Seth and all of these channelers. So I was all in. There was no resistance in me whatsoever. And of course, with 12 years of doing the course, I knew my frequency was high. I knew I was in a loving place. I'd done all this forgiveness work. And so over the next 3 months, well, they started writing longhand initially, but they wrote so quickly that I couldn't read it after. I knew what I was writing as I was writing it, but then I didn't know. I didn't know what it was saying if I read it the next day. And then they started typing. So I was getting 2 streams of information. I was getting personal guidance information. So they said things like, you eat too quickly and you eat twice as much as you should eat. So they wanted me to eat more slowly and cut my food in half. They would get very mad at me if I had anything really bad. So one of my vices at the time was to buy a big bag of chips and drink some wine, and they would get very upset with me when I do that. They didn't want me to watch television shows that were violent or anything like that. So they really started to kind of interfere in my personal freedom. And we did get into a few fights in those early days where I was like, I really don't like being told what to do. So that didn't go down so well. And then the other stream of information was they started writing Making Love to God. So they wanted to write this book about sexuality and sexual energy. They said that sexual energy is the most powerful energy we have to deal with as humans, and it's the most distorted on our planet. And so it's very, very important for this book to be written. I wasn't happy about the subject matter. I was like, couldn't you find an easier subject than sex for my first book? Come on, it's crazy. Little did I know that it was going to get more and more intense from then on. After about 2 months of this writing on the computer, they said, we are going to prepare you to speak for us. And so I started, throughout the summer, I would lay down on my bed for an hour in the middle of the day, and I would give them permission to do energy work on me. So they made contact with me in that first Kundalini experience, but they continued every single day to do energy work on me. So I would lay on my bed and my hands would work. They would work my hands. I was just surrendered to it. They would work, they would tap, they would do all kinds of things. And about 3 months in, they said, we're going to prepare you to speak for us. And so I started to get all of this energy around my throat. And one day I just started to speak, and they gave a lecture on unconditional love. They sounded a bit computerish in the beginning, and they said, we don't want you to record this voice. We need to get used to using your voice. So I don't have any recordings of that, but I started walking around my apartment channeling. I started walking along the beach channeling, and they channel about light and the waves and energy and all kinds of things. And I just was completely surrendered to this. And then come October, they said, you have to move. You have to move. You have to move. You have to go back to Salt Spring Island. I was in Victoria, which is a city close by. And I didn't want to. I just left Salt Spring, and they said, you've got to move. And they would not talk about anything else. And I finally gave up, and I said, okay, I'll move. And they said, whatever you can't fit in your Jeep, you have to leave behind. Pretty intense experience when you think about it. But again, I knew what was happening. I knew that this was an amazing opportunity. And so I complied, and I would leave my furniture out in the street, and I just packed my Jeep up. And as it turned out, a friend of mine, Nicola, her daughter went into premature labor, and she said, I'm going to be out of my house for 4 months. You can come and stay at my house. So November 1st was when she left to go look after her daughter. So I had a house for 4 months. And lo and behold, the place that I had worked at sewing found out I was on the island. They saw me at a coffee shop, and they said, we need someone part-time. Do you want to come work? So November 1st was a job and a house waiting for me. And that was why Ananda wanted me to move so quickly. They only gave me 2 weeks notice to get there. But suddenly I had a house, because they did not want me to work. They did not want me to be full-time work. They wanted me to write. And so this whole channeling thing became what I did. I worked for 2.5 days a week just to buy food and put gas in my car. And I wrote Making Love to God that first winter. Now, I started channeling other beings. I had some extraterrestrials come in. I had several different extraterrestrials, actually. And I worked on that book 4.5 days a week. I was channeling and transcribing. And I managed to find, once that book was done, I was going to publish it myself because I had done all of this digital marketing. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. I need a publisher. I'm not going to be selling these books at markets and things like that. So basically what happened was they would start writing a new book the second I finished. It took me 8 months to do Making Love to God. And I was just enthralled with this whole process. Salt Spring Island is a place of hippies and channelers and psychics and Kundalini workers and yoga teachers and all of that stuff. So it was a much better environment. They really wanted me in that environment to go through this process of writing these books. And so I channeled 6 books in 5 years, and they would literally start one book the day after I finished the first one. I luckily got a publisher for Making Love to God. And I had heard that Stephen King had 900 refusals for Carrie, his first book. And so I decided that I was willing to write 900 letters to publishers. And so I started doing that, fully expecting to have to write hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And I had people telling me that I needed to go see a doctor, that I was mad. Told them, giving them samples of the book and telling my story. And it was the 42nd letter that connected with Light Technology Publishing in Flagstaff, Arizona. And she said she'd publish the book. And it was a miracle. I couldn't believe it. And then, so at the end of that book, I'll just tell one more story about the Jesus connection, and then you guys can ask your questions. My sister's friend died, This was in the May, I think. So I'd moved back to the island in October, and this was the following May. I'd just finished Making Love to God. I'd got the publisher, and her friend had died, and she was beside herself. And I had been channeling for her that winter. So I said, well, why don't you come over? And Ananda, let's ask Ananda what's going on. He had died unexpectedly. They'd found him in his apartment. He was 61 years old, but I'd met him. I knew who he was, very lovely English guy. And she came over. But just before she got to the house sit that I was in, Ananda came through and said, there's someone here who wants to talk to your sister. It's Malcolm. Will you let him come through for her? And I was like, hell yes, of course. And Malcolm is the guy who had just died. This was the first time I channeled anybody else other than Ananda and a few ETs, I guess. But I hadn't channeled any dead people as far as I knew. He came through and he said, I just want to talk to your sister and tell her what it's like. Tell her what it's like to die and that I'm okay. And so when my sister knocked on the door, I said, you never guess who wants to talk to you. It's Malcolm. And she said, oh my God, she was just crying everywhere she went. She was just beside herself with sadness and grief. And so I channeled Malcolm for 45 minutes. And he came through and he told her what it was like to die. He told her what it was like to go to his own funeral. He said he was hanging out with his mum. His mum had died a couple of years before. And she left happy, and it just put her mind at ease. And Ananda said to me after she left, there's a long line of beings here. They all want to talk to you. They're all famous. It's going to be a book. Are you willing to do it? And I said, what the hell? Sure, okay. And that was the beginning of Great Minds Speak to You. The next day, I would get up at 5 a.m. before I'd go to work, and I would channel. I didn't know who I was going to be channeling. Albert Einstein came through. Marilyn Monroe came through. The Kennedy brothers came through, and it went on and on for an entire month. There were 20 in all told. And about number 15, I thought, I wonder who the last person is going to be. It's going to be Elvis or Gandhi or someone super famous, because these were all really famous people I was channeling. And I said to myself, just don't be Jesus. Just don't be Jesus. And 18, 19, and of course, number 20, it was Jesus. And he came through and he said Jesus-y things like praying for your enemy and forgiveness. And I got through that half an hour of channeling him, and I thought, oh, okay, well, that wasn't so bad. That wasn't so bad. It's okay. And that was the book, 20 Dead Celebrities, I tell people, and they all had a message for the world. And they talked about their incarnation. They talked about their deaths. They talked about their dying experiences. It's a great book, actually. A lot of people haven't read it because it's celebrities. But the next morning, Jesus came through and said to me, he said, I want you to write my autobiography. But first, you have to read the New Testament. And that was the beginning of my relationship with Jesus. So he waited for a year to channel, because he said I would not have done it if he had come through first. He said it would have been too much for me. So the year of channeling with Ananda and getting used to the whole experience was what I needed to be able to open up to channeling for him. And of course, it was a huge psychological journey. And I didn't tell anyone what I was doing for a long time. So I'm going to take a break there because there's a whole Jesus story thing. So I think it's a great time to, if anyone has any questions or curiosities about what I've said so far. So that's like just the beginning of me channeling Jesus. So it's like, it's a whole story.
So you just mentioned how he was the 20th. So is it because his vibrations were so much higher than the others that you channeled first?
No, Ananda said that they used these other celebrities had a message for the world that they wanted people to listen to, but they had to train me to be willing to channel him. So they were actually using all of these other celebrities as a way of getting me used to surrendering to the other beings channeling through me. So I was willing to do it for my sister because she was in pain and I knew the person. And they said that opened the door to channeling other beings. And then they said that the 19 leading up to Jesus was really for my benefit to learn how to open to channeling him, because it's a real psychological journey to actually channel Jesus. Because, when he first asked me, he said, I want you to think about this for 24 hours, when he asked me to write his autobiography. And I didn't know I was scared of the Catholic Church. That came up. I didn't know I was scared of the government. That came up. I thought I could be killed for doing this. This could be dangerous work. But because I had attempted suicide when I was 17, I had this idea in my head that my life really wasn't mine. Like, I'd been willing to give it up. And so I thought, why not? Like, I'm really lucky to be here. If it'd been up to me, I wouldn't even be here. So it's interesting how that suicide attempt affected my thinking around doing this, what I perceived at the time to be quite a dangerous job, in actual fact. I was like, you can get put away in a loony bin, you could get shot, who knows? Who knows what could happen? But I decided to go for it.
Yeah, Helen Schuckman was concerned too, right? When she first channeled the course, she just called it the voice at first. Because she was, for you guys that don't know, she was a atheist Jewish professor of psychology at Columbia
and also,
University.
I know the look at, I'm used to it now, and I've been out of the closet, out of the Jesus closet for a long time. But when I tell people what I do, the look on their face is so funny, because some people just get this blank, terrified look on their face, and you just know they're like, how do I get away from this person? Or other people are like, oh, I've heard of that. Okay. And, there's the people who are open to it. But I always, kind of read the room before I tell anyone what I do. I ask them a few questions. They'll say, what do you do? And I say, I'm a writer. And they'll go, what do you write? And I'm like, oh, I write spiritual books. And they're like, oh, what about? And I just I test the waters before I tell them the whole truth.
Why do you think people are triggered to hear that somebody's channeling Jesus? Because
I think it's because of the history with the church. I think the Catholic Church killed a lot of people who were communicating with spirit, the witches, the healers. The mandate of the Catholic Church was the only way that you can reach God is through us. Jesus is God incarnate. So I think that there was so much punishment and cruelty around anybody that communicated, that we actually have almost like a genetic memory of how dangerous it is to communicate with spirit. I think we're actually in a real recovery phase from the church's indoctrination over, now let's look at it, a couple of thousand years. That's a long time to be under the boot of a system. And then in the modern world, you've got the mental institutions putting people away for having any kind of listening to voices, any kind of thing. I mean, if I had gone to a regular doctor when I was having this Kundalini awakening, they would have locked me up and medicated me, undoubtedly.
Right.
Yeah, no doubt about it. That's why people are afraid, because it's been a very dangerous thing to do. Yeah.
And that's why we have our sharing group.
That's right.
People, as you know, people can share anything, any experience in a safe place. And it's one place where nobody feels crazy. So could you explain a little bit about Jesus of the Course versus Jesus of the New Testament, and the way Jesus is, mentioned by the churches? And then also, you said that you didn't even use the word Jesus at the first, right?
Well, when I was before I had the channeling experience, I realized that I was suffering less because of what I was learning through the course. But regular people they usually don't want to hear about Jesus, Holy Spirit, God. So many people have been traumatized by churches or family religions or whatever. So I would just talk about, focusing your mind and things like that. Getting rid of resentments, sort of just realizing that, just as we talked earlier, how most people are raised in dysfunctional families, a lot of people have a lot of trauma around religions.
Yeah.
So before I started actually channeling him, I wouldn't mention any of the words of the course at all because it would turn people off. It would scare them. The Jesus of my understanding is that he is teaching us how to do what he did. And the church, of course, teaches that he is the only Son of God, and none of us are like him in any way, shape, or form. That he is so far above us that we cannot, we can try and emulate him, but we probably won't do it. We're born sinners, all of these kinds of very harsh and judgmental, finite kind of definitions. But in the course, he says that he's our older brother and he knows a bunch more of stuff than we do, and that we actually just need to listen to him and do as he says because he has the experience to teach us. And that we have amazing abilities that can come to us. So I consider this channeling experience that I'm having, channeling all of these books and this kind of thing, I consider that ability something that has been gifted to me because of my Course in Miracles practice, not because I'm a special person, not because I'm gifted in any way, but because I did what he asked us to do, which is to practice forgiveness, to change our minds from fearful, judgmental minds to loving, forgiving minds. And I really did. I was a very, very serious course student, and I could not tolerate, once I got to that 10 or 11 year mark, I couldn't tolerate having judgment in my mind anymore, having resentments anymore. The more peaceful my mind got, the less I could tolerate my hateful thoughts. And so I would do everything I could to get rid of those judgmental, hateful thoughts. And I did it to the nth degree, basically. In that 6 months leading up to the Kundalini awakening, I was praying about this resentment night and day, all the time. And I can be very, very focused. I'm a highly productive person. And I just decided that I did not want these hateful thoughts in my mind anymore. And so I did every single thing I could to relieve my mind of that suffering. And that's really what Jesus' true teachings are. So I believe that that's what he taught when he was here on the earth. But it was hijacked, let's say, by the church. And there were untruths put in, things like going to hell. He never taught about hell. He never taught about the brimstone and fire and all of that stuff. That the church was run by humans who had egos and wanted power and influence. They saw that the influence that his teachings had on people. After all, I mean, he was drawing great crowds and healing people when he was walking on the earth plane. So those people in that time and place, as anyone would take advantage, they took advantage and they started to use his teachings, but interspersed it with very judgmental, very unloving. And as you can tell, as the church grew more and more powerful and richer, it became a murderous entity that killed anybody that disagreed with it. So from, the time that he taught these teachings, and these teachings, I believe, are what he was teaching his disciples and what he was trying to help people understand, that your mind is the creator. And if you have hateful thoughts, you will suffer. And if you have loving thoughts, forgiving thoughts, you won't suffer. And it's kind of magic. It's kind of a scientific equation. If you do your forgiveness practice, you'll have a more peaceful mind. And as you have a more peaceful mind, you'll get clearer and clearer guidance from your guides and teachers. And eventually your frequency will go up to the higher levels of 3D, where your guides and teachers can communicate with you easily. And that's what happened with the Kundalini awakening and Ananda making contact with me. I had, through that intense 6 months of forgiveness practice, raised my frequency to the higher levels of 3D, and then they could communicate with me. And then that 3 months that they were doing all the energy work on me, they were raising my frequency even higher so that I could speak for them, so that I could communicate. So that's all we're doing. The lower realms of 3D are where mass media wants us to be. Fear and war and fires and death constantly. You know, the popular TV shows are about killers and hospitals and wars and police. They're all about death. So the lower realms of 3D are where we suffer. And this is what the course does through these 365 lessons. It slowly takes your mind from being fearful and judgmental into a calm, loving place where knowledge from spirit can reach you. And that's where the really cool things start to happen.
Yeah. So, two questions. What is the Christ according to the Course in Miracles? A lot of people think that's Jesus's last name.
Yeah.
So what is the Christ according to the Course? And then if you can explain how forgiveness according to the Course is different than what most people think.
Okay, so my understanding of Christ consciousness is that there is this loving, this oneness that we experience when we have these out-of-body experiences is what the Course calls the real world. It is this all-encompassing, all-forgiving, non-judgmental, totally accepting consciousness that we have separated ourselves from. So there's like a ladder. There's a ladder that you climb up out of separation. So the Course teaches that we have chosen separation, that God has not kicked us out of heaven, that we have voluntarily come down here because we believe in sex, drugs, rock and roll, power, food, whatever it is that is the idol that you're chasing here. And we all have these things that we lust after or want. And as we live out our experience here in separation, we get sick of those things. We've drunk all the wine we want to drink. We've bought all the cars we want to buy. And then there comes a point where we will actually say in our separated state, and this is what Helen, the channeler of the Course, said to Bill, the guy who helped her, was there must be a better way. We find out, I think we often call it a midlife crisis, in actual fact, which is that I've done everything I want. I've spent all the money. I've eaten all the food. I've had sex with all these people, whatever your drug of choice is. And there comes a point where you're just like, I'm still not happy. And I've done all these things that I've wanted. There must be a better way. And that's when Jesus says we become teachable in that moment. That's when often the Course will come to us at these low points where we have given up chasing the ego's dictates. The ego is the part of our consciousness, which is sort of the opposite of Christ consciousness, if you will. The ego is the part that believes in death. It believes in sickness. It believes in separation. It believes that you are alone and that you have to do everything. And Christ consciousness is the unity consciousness from which we all originally come, and that we return to if we follow Jesus' teachings. And so he was Jesus the man, and he became Jesus the Christ when he became enlightened. So he then, when he was baptized and he became this amazing healer, he was connected to that consciousness that is Christ consciousness. So people call it Buddha mind or Christ consciousness. It's an all-loving consciousness that we all have access to if we choose love. But most of us don't choose love. We're very judgmental. We're very fearful. And so we're lurking down at the bottom rungs of the ladder in this lower 3D realm. And it is only when we choose unity consciousness, we stop being so judgmental through this practice of doing A Course in Miracles, that we start to feel more peace. We start to get happier. We start to connect with people. We start to step up that ladder. We don't have feelings of oneness necessarily. I feel that if any of us have an experience of oneness, it's just an amazing gift that we get to see the truth of Christ consciousness. People who have near-death experiences obviously have this feeling of oneness and this understanding that this place is here is kind of illusory. It's a crazy game we're playing, but it's because we choose it. And people say, well, why would we choose it? And we go, well, why do you still choose to judge? Why do you still choose to fear? This is within our ability to change if we train our minds. We have to train our minds out of what we've been trained into. And that is what our society and media does, and our parents and religions. They train us into these lower frequencies. And of course, for example, the church used fear and fear of hell, fear of judgment, fear of the Inquisition to terrify people into a spiritual practice that was not a high frequency spiritual practice. So we're going from the ego mind, climbing slowly up the ladder through the teachings of A Course in Miracles to these higher realms of 3D. So now, for example, even though I'm channeling Jesus, I'm still in a body. I still perceive myself as an individual. I'm not enlightened. I still struggle with normal things that people struggle with. But I have a very, very peaceful mind. I have, of course, an amazing purpose. I never question what I'm doing or why I'm doing it. It's amazing to see the effect that this ministry has had on people, how it's saved lives and transformed lives. And I can only recommend anyone who has not looked at the course to do the lessons and give it a go and give it a year and see how different you will be. Forgiveness from the course's point of view is that we have chosen separation and that we have created this world from a state of fear, and that we have placed outside of ourselves the things that frighten us, the things that we hate, the things that we detest, the difficult things that we haven't managed. And we have this self-awareness that we think of as the face of innocence. This is what Jesus calls it in the Course, where you think of yourself as a good person, you think of yourself as, those people are bad, that world is bad, gosh, look at the world, look at the wars, look at all that. The murderers, the stealers, they're all bad, but I'm a good person. And what we actually have in that experience is a split mind. We have a mind that we perceive as Tina. I'm Tina. This is my consciousness. And everything outside of me is separate from me. This is the separation experience. So if you think of it that way, when the atonement is the reintegration of our mind, and we heal our split mind through forgiveness work. In the Course's teaching, when we forgive, we understand that everything out there is not separate from us, that it's a projection of our consciousness, and that if we hate out there, we're actually hating an aspect of ourselves. Everyone's heard about these ideas in the New Age kind of talk of we're all one, and whatever you do to someone else, you do to yourself. But the Course really goes into great detail about it. And the forgiveness practice of the Course is stepping back from constantly judging and coming to a place of radical acceptance of what is, first of all, and working internally, as I did with that resentment that I had with my sister, to work on past resentments, things that you perceive have been done to you that were wrong, someone who betrayed you, someone who hurt you, an ex-husband, an ex-wife, a family member. These are the old resentments that if we keep feeding them, cause us suffering and maintain the separation. So the Course's teaching is, the idea is to constantly reduce this idea of separation by understanding that the world out there is not out there, it's in here. And that this whole thing is a projection. It's a whole projection. Now, it's very hard to understand it because it does feel like that person across from the table from you is a separate person. But as you start to practice forgiveness and through the studying of the lessons, which is the mind training part of it, you're training your mind to have loving thoughts rather than hateful thoughts. And a lot of people don't realize that they have hateful thoughts until they start training their mind with the lessons. When I first started doing the lessons, I found out, I didn't realize this, I was in a constant fight with my mum in my head all the time. I was having fictitious fights with her all the time. So she became one of my first forgiveness practices, where I would stop those little movies playing out in my head. So most people have that experience of having a conversation with someone in their head that's not there, or replaying an argument and thinking, well, I'm going to say this in my head, or a future scenario they're playing in their head. These are all fantasies. These are all images that your mind is creating based on the ego's belief in separation. So this is one of the practices that I have, is that I really do my very best not to ruminate on other people or resentments or problems when I'm not actually engaged with that person in real life. So that's been one of my practices over the years. So I have like zero tolerance for fantasies of future scenarios. And what happens, and a lot of people have heard this, is, of course, if you're worrying about the future or an argument you're going to have or a difficult conversation, you start to feel anxious, because your body actually doesn't know the difference between fantasy and reality. And a lot of people are actually fantasizing, reminiscing about past hurts, reminiscing about past betrayals, judging the present, and worrying about the future. And you're actually having a constant state of lack of peace, because your mind, this amazing creative device that we've been given, is untrained. And Jesus uses this lovely analogy where he says, your mind is like a wild stallion galloping around a field, and your assignment is to get a saddle on that horse. So here you have this horse, it's 1,500 pounds of crazy energy, and your assignment is to get a saddle on that horse. He says, you can try and get a saddle on that horse for years, and it will just run around neighing, kicking up its heels and going, good luck with that, you're not going to do it. He says, sit under a tree and read a book on how to train horses. Do that, and you will be able to train the horse, and you'll be able to get the saddle on it. And he says, the Course in Miracles is that book, and the wild stallion is your mind. So we have these creative minds that, in fact, according to the Course, are manufacturing this dream that we live in. Now, most people don't think of it as a dream. People think of the world as really real. But as you spend more and more time with the Course, you actually come to see there's this crazy thing that happens, and most people haven't done it. But as you change your mind, the world changes to reflect your mind being changed. So you can have a forgiveness practice with someone in your life, and that person will phone you, or that person will seem to actually change and become more compatible with you. So it's a very interesting thing. And I always think it does kind of prove that your mind is actually creating the world. When you change your mind, the world has to change. And so any of you who are listening, if you have aspects of your life that you don't like, or things that you want to change, deepen your Course practice, or start the Course if you haven't done it, and Jesus will show you how to do it. He will help guide you as you do the lessons and as you practice forgiveness.
Yeah, that's, for the people who haven't studied the Course, and even if you have, if you've heard of Ho'oponopono, which is Hawaiian Huna, it's ancient. It's all about forgiveness as well.
Yeah.
It's settled a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, it's all about forgiveness work. And then there's a version of, it's called Sahaja Yoga. Have you ever seen that? In that, literally, they do forgiveness work in the I'll send you a link. They do exercises, and the more forgiveness that you work on, the more you can feel your Kundalini energy.
That's exactly what happened to me. Exactly what happened to me. So, I see people, it's so funny because I'll say to people who are doing Kundalini yoga, I'm like, you actually shouldn't ask for a Kundalini awakening. Your life will be completely different afterwards. Like, it should have a warning on it, a warning label, actually.
That's right. That's what I say in our NDE group when people say they wished they could have an NDE, because it's just us stubborn people that have NDEs. People like you that listen don't have to have an NDE. And that's, and that's what's so cool is so I've been studying the course, most people know, since I was 18. And when I met Marianne Williamson, and so I've done the lessons, what, like 40, 50 times, something like that. Probably 40, 30, 40. But it wasn't until my last NDE that I actually like got it. So it's so cool that, it only took you 5 years when you said that you were kind of, having some issues, ego issues or whatever, because for me, I probably did that every couple of years, like until I was, in 2019, when I finally, it's like, okay, I'm ready to get serious here.
Well, that was the original premise that we connected with each other, was this idea that NDEs are the wake-up call from spirit, because you aren't doing this kind of work, and it gives you an opportunity with this amazing experience of oneness that people have during NDEs, that you actually get shown the truth, right? That's my prayer. Please transform my perception so I can see the truth. And then you come back, and then you've got this, you've got a big step up. Now, the thing that I think happens to a lot of people, and you may agree because you've had a few NDEs, is that the NDE itself, that experience of oneness, when you come back into your regular consciousness, your ego has not been deflated. It has not been subdued in a lot of ways. And this is really what the lessons and the practice of forgiveness does, is it's you actively using your free will to stop the ego getting what it wants. What the ego wants is guilt. It wants to make you guilty, or it'll make yourself guilty. It doesn't care who it makes guilty, but it wants to make someone the bad guy. And I think what happens is the NDE gives you this experience of oneness, like I had with the out-of-body experience when I first started the course. But then our egos reassert themselves after, because you may have found that there was a 3-day or a 3-week blissful hangover from your NDE, but then the ego starts to assert itself again, and it asserts itself because we allow it to. So really, for me, I think the course is a wonderful combination thing to do with an NDE experience, because it's actually working to disempower the ego. It's not trying to get rid of the ego. The ego is what tells you to be afraid if there's a rabid dog on the street. But what happens in our society is that the ego is fed and fed and fed and fed. Just think of the hatred that is poured through the news about politics, and this person's terrible and that person's terrible, and the horrible, it's just like making people guilty, and this feeds our egos. And this is the kind of thing that we will actually recognize, that we want to watch these things because our ego likes it. So it's like, they say when you drive past a car accident, you want to see. That's the ego wants to see. It wants to see death. It wants to scare you. And that's really what the course is working to alleviate in your mind. It's taking you from fear and separation to loving connection and integration.
Right. Yeah, that was something I actually forgot to mention about when you were saying, as we change our thoughts and heal our minds, the world looks different. Yep. Which is actually what his Dr. Hugh Lin did to a group of prisoners here in Hawaii that had mental illness. And this is documented, that he saw them differently. He didn't meet them individually, but he worked on them from afar, using Ho'oponopono, which is basic forgiveness. Yep. And he was able to heal that whole prison population, and they closed down that part of the...
Yeah, it's called A Course in Miracles for a reason. Miracles happen, and they really do. It's aptly named. I've seen so many miracles in my life, and it doesn't prevent you from living an ordinary life. I would say, apart from what I do for a living, I live a very ordinary life, but it's a peaceful life. It's a quiet life. It's not full of drama and awful things. My life used to be full of drama and awful things. And a peaceful mind is the most valuable thing you can have, because when you've got a resentment, when you've got and you can't sleep, and you're like, oh, that thing that when you're upset at someone, or your boss said something, or your partner said something you hate, and it just goes round and round. There's nothing is more important than a peaceful mind. And that is, to me, the greatest gift of A Course in Miracles. Obviously, the books and the Channeling Jesus experience has been an amazing thing. Although it was very, very challenging and difficult in the beginning, I wasn't completely happy about it in the beginning. I was willing, but it did prove to have some challenges for sure.
Well, I was the same way. I've been drug along kicking and screaming for the last 40 years, but now I'm finally listening. Oh, so, somebody just actually did put a good question in. Many people use the word Yeshua versus Jesus.
Yep.
Does it matter to him? What does he think about that?
He said when he first started writing Jesus, My Autobiography, that I'm using the word Jesus because it triggers people. That's why he uses it, because at the beginning of his book, he said, you cannot heal your planet until you find out who I am truly, because so much of your society's structure is built on untruths about him. So he wanted to use it to give people. So if you're triggered by a word, let's say I say the word bottle. Most people aren't triggered by that word. They haven't had a bad experience with it. If your mother was killed by a bottle, you might have a trigger response. That means that you've got some work to do, some forgiveness work to do around that word. So most people in our society have emotional reactions to the word God, to the word Jesus, and that means that they've had a negative experience. If that reaction is a negative trigger, they have some forgiveness work to do with that word. And so he said that's why he used that word in this particular book. I'm sure with other channelers, he uses other words, but my assignment with this particular book was to tell his true story about his life and what he did and how it transpired. And he said it was to set the record straight so that people could stop thinking about his life back then. He wants people to practice his teachings now. And so he said he wrote that book so that you could stop asking questions about him. That his life back then is not as important as practicing his teachings now. And that's really what he wants people to do.
And A Course in Miracles is not a religion.
No.
It is not. So he's asking us to be like him.
Yes.
Right? But not necessarily. Huh?
And he's teaching us how to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. So he's saying, I'm no different than you. And in the Bible, he actually says, everything I do, you can do too. Most people don't kind of pay attention to that phrase, but that is what he's saying through the Course is, we're the same. I'm just further along the road than you. That's all. And if you listen to me, because I know how to get here, then you too will be able to do these things. Which really is blasphemy to the Christian church.
Right.
Right. And this is what our Judeo-Christian society is stuck in, is thousands of years of the church teaching things that Jesus is teaching something quite different. And so the Course, if you are a traditionally raised Christian, there's going to be a lot of things in the Course that trigger you, because he's teaching a very, very different story than the church teaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what is a miracle according to the Course?
A miracle is a transformation that happens that's kind of out of time and space. Let's say a miracle of healing, for example. We are taught that there is Newtonian physics, where you have to have a cause and effect, that you can't heal something unless certain things happen, and they take physical interaction, cause and effect, and it takes time. So, for example, if you have cancer, you know how doctors hate spontaneous healing. So someone like Anita Morjani, who died on, had a near-death experience and was riddled with cancer, she had a spontaneous healing, a miraculous healing, because in her her near-death experience, her consciousness was changed. And so her mind was changed. And so the miracle of healing happened because her mind was so radically altered that the body healed itself, which is a miracle, right? There was no chemotherapy. The doctor said she was a goner. That was it. But because her mind changed radically through a near-death experience, her body responded, because the body is created by your mind. We're not taught that the world really is created by our mind too. So a miracle is the kind of thing where you will, like you said, that doctor who did the forgiveness prayers for those prisoners, his transformation of mind made something happen that was not explicable by Newtonian physics with the cause and effect and time. So it's an out of time, out of physics result of a transformed mind. So that's really what a miracle is. And that's what the course is teaching us. It's teaching us that anything in your physical body, anything in your life that is low frequency is coming from an aspect of your mind that you have allowed to live there. It could be that you don't trust people. It could be that you hate the opposite sex because you had a bad marriage. It could be any number of things, and that your thoughts and beliefs about that will manifest it in the world in front of you, that the thing you hate will show up. And a miracle is when you do forgiveness work around that subject, and that thing that showed up will either disappear or heal or transform in some way. So it is the belief that transforming your consciousness will transform everything. And it doesn't require time. It can be done very, very quickly. So for anyone who has a resentment, for example, that person who keeps showing up in your head that you have these imaginary fights with, or that you hate them and you don't want to talk to them or whatever, start praying. This is what Jesus was talking about when he was saying to pray for your enemies, is that you will stop suffering if you pray for your enemies. And you won't want to do it, and your ego will tell you that they're going to win and you're going to lose. But the opposite is in fact true, that when you do forgiveness work and you pray for your enemies, the miracle will happen and everything will get changed. Now, you're not in charge of the miracle. Jesus asks us to let him work the miracles and be in charge of them. So when we do our forgiveness work, we shouldn't really have an agenda for it. We should just know that we have hateful thoughts about someone, and that's going to bring negative things. Not only the negative feeling that you have immediately when you have a hateful thought, but that it's going to bring things of a like frequency to that hateful thought into your world. So this is the idea of the universe being a reflective universe, that if you have a hateful thought about someone, that low frequency is going to be reflected back to you in the universe.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying, and the course is saying, change your mind, change your thoughts first, and then all else follows. So don't necessarily focus on your body healing, but focus on healing your mind.
Well, the sickness, the general state of sickness is that you have low frequency thoughts or feelings that are contaminating your energy system, if you will. And that even things like catching a cold, even things like, having a sore hip, that if you actually look at the area of the body that is being affected, that the chakra that is related to that area of the body is going to give you a clue as to what that thought or that unloving idea in your mind is. So, for example, the first chakra is often about family, the tribe, survival, The second chakra is about creativity, sexuality, reproduction, creativity. The third chakra is your solar plexus, which is about personal power and your ability to act in the world. And each chakra has these different things. So if you have, I'll give you an example of this. In one of the many, many, many channeling sessions I've done, somebody has a tumor in the top of their mouth that is inoperable. So it requires the destruction of that person's whole top jaw to get, like, they won't be able to speak, they'll lose all their teeth. Really, really awful surgery to get this thing out. And this person asked why they have this tumor in their mouth, and I don't remember if it was Ananda or Jesus. And they said, because you use your voice as a weapon. So this person is very cruel with their words, very attacking with their words. And so this tumor in their mouth is a result of that low frequency. So that person had the opportunity in hearing that information to go, oh my God, I do use and they do use their mouth as a weapon. They're a very cruel person, verbally, very attacking. And it's interesting that it's inoperable. They can't do it without literally destroying the whole top jaw. So this person has the choice to watch the tumor grow or become gentler in their speech. So that's a perfect kind of little microcosm of, now, why is that person being mean with their speech? They believe that attack is going to bring them what they want, right? They've got this distortion in their mind that being cruel hurts other people, which means they're safer. So they have a distortion in their mind, which is creating a distortion in their physical body. So that's kind of a little example of how it can play out.
Right. Yeah, I remember when I got the whole concept of upside down thinking and how in this world, like you just said, with that person that we think hurting somebody else is going to help us, not realizing that loving somebody else is going to help us. So it's like, that's when I started realizing for me, like literally the opposite of what I thought my whole life.
Yep.
Is what this court just teaching us to do.
And of course, when Jesus says that we chose to come into separation, these are the kinds of beliefs that bring us into separation. That attack will get me what I want. And if you spend 30 or 40 years on the planet doing that, you will strengthen that belief, right? But you may end up with no friends. You may end up having all kinds of horrible experiences. And usually it's our suffering that actually ends up waking us up. But those are the kinds of beliefs that actually bring us into separation and perpetuate the separation. So the Course lessons and Jesus' teachings are about stepping back from judgment, radical acceptance. So someone like Byron Katie's work is very, very powerful. This idea that you have to love what is. Even though you don't like it, you have to let it be because it's in manifestation already. It's showing you something. It's reflective, right? So the Course really does that. And I don't know if you've had this experience, but through the years of doing the Course, I kind of approach situations from two aspects. I have the human aspect where somebody betrays me or someone screams and yells at me, is angry at me. I'll deal with it as a human, which is, I don't want to hang out with you and you're fired, or I'm not your friend anymore. I'll deal with it on that level initially. And then I will ask, why is this showing up? What in me am I angry? Do I betray myself? So I look at things from the human point of view, because I think it's really important that we do let ourselves be human. And I think we have to let ourselves be at the level of evolution that we're at. Like, I know I've got myself into trouble sometimes trying to be more spiritual than I am. I'm becoming more loving as time goes on. I'm understanding myself more and more as time goes on, but I do let myself function as a human. And yet, whenever I have a negative experience in my life, which I have them all the time, I ask myself, okay, what's going on here? Why am I getting sick? Or why have I got this injury? Or why have I got this problem? And so I go to the course for those answers. And I don't really micromanage myself by channeling for myself all the time. Jesus and Ananda work with me through feelings of knowledge, understanding, dreams. I often get messages in dreams. So I semi-retired this year because I kept getting sick. And I was shown the last time I got really sick in October that I was working too much and I was in survival mode, and it was coming from a place of fear. I wasn't consciously doing it, but they showed me in a dream all of the experiences I was missing because I was working too much. And so it was an old belief. I'd always been, never had any money when I was younger. I'd always been in survival mode, always keeping the wolf away from the door. That's changed since the course. But there was this aspect of me that was still doing that. I was still working really, really hard as if I had to. And so after I was shown that dream that I was missing all these opportunities, I stopped doing one-on-one sessions, and I've taken up pottery, and I've gone back to the gym and doing I made 4 or 5 decisions based on that dream. So Jesus will work with you. And if you're doing the course, Jesus is working with you. When you start the course, and this is a wonderful thing, who wouldn't want Jesus to be your spiritual teacher? He is. When you start doing the course, he will actively work with you to heal your mind and to remove from your mind, which is the purpose of the course, to reintegrate your mind, to make you whole and a loving person. And it's a journey. Like I was a very unloving, judgmental, fearful person. You wouldn't have necessarily known it from the outside, but I've completely changed. I'm still Tina. My personality is the same. I say it's sort of like a cactus. You know, we have all these prickly bits, all these triggers and wounds. I think the course is like, it takes away all the prickles. And you're still a cactus. I'm still Tina, but I am calmer, gentler, more patient. And I would say healthier mentally. I would say, no means no. When I say, if I don't want to do something, I don't do it. It's one of my big practices, is deleting from my life anything that I don't want to do. So I have, through that practice, which is self-love, becoming more loving to myself, I've eliminated all the things I don't want to do out of my life. So I have this amazing life now where I get to be free and do what I want to do, and to do this amazing work with Jesus Channeling. And I just can't recommend the course enough to anyone who is struggling with the world, having difficulty, especially with the kinds of things we're seeing on the news. The course will 100% guaranteed help.
Yes. And I do want to mention for everybody who's not familiar with the course that Robert Perry is his name. He did several studies for ions that actually showed the intended effects of A Course in Miracles versus near-death experiences.
Yep.
And which is the whole reason, like, it's continued to help me, because I didn't really understand it, even though I'd been doing it for all these years, until my NDE. And so that's why it can be valuable for NDEers, but also people that say they want an NDE, and it's like, no, you don't. You just want to wake up.
You don't want to be in a severe car accident, or you don't want to have an exploding appendix. No, you don't. And you don't need to. And that's, we discussed that. And I just said, I truly believe that A Course in Miracles is the preemptive way of avoiding a near-death experience. And when I talked about those blissful experiences, those experiences of oneness and peace of mind, incredible experiences. That summer that I had the Kundalini awakening was the most amazing experience. Like, in some ways, I wish I could experience it again, but I couldn't really function as a human being for those 3 months. I was unemployable. I couldn't talk to people. I was in another world. But trust me, if forgiveness work can bring about those kinds of experiences, you do want it. You really do. The thing you have to remember is, though, that when you came into separation, there's a big part of your mind that doesn't want it. that wants the guilt, that wants the sickness, that wants the death. And most people would say, no, I don't want any of that. I only want love. But I can guarantee that if you do the Course in Miracles lessons on a daily basis for 365 days, you will see that your mind is not as loving as you think it is. And that is why we get sick. That is why we have enemies. That is why we want other people to be guilty, or we beat up on ourselves. It's all coming from within our own untrained mind, this powerful galloping stallion, as Jesus says, that is untrained. The thing is, we have been trained by the school system, by churches and religions, by dysfunctional families, by murder mystery shows, by the news. We have constant conditioning programs that are keeping us in the lower realms of 3D. And that is why we suffer, because we are being constantly taught that death and destruction is the set point here. And truly, Jesus says, this is the ego's playground. This is not a happy place here. But you can escape it by studying A Course in Miracles and doing the lessons and practicing. Just doing the lessons doesn't work. You have to practice and make it part of your daily life, and stepping back from judgment. So yeah, it's the most amazing thing. And from day one, my mandate was that
Right.
people don't need to suffer. They just don't know that they don't need to suffer.
So can you just back up about what you were saying about, vibrations? And because somebody had wanted to know about, watching murder shows and stuff like that.
Yep. Well, the ego is fascinated with death. It's fascinated with guilt. It's fascinated with suffering. It's fascinated with war. These are all aspects of separation. And you have to look at the world, and it's really not that loving a place. Like, we have our love relationships in the world, but even those are fraught with ego and guilt and all kinds of things. So the way I look at it is there's lower realms of 3D and higher realms of 3D. So we're all in these physical bodies. We all have these minds, these super creative minds. We all have this belief in separation. How do we know we have a belief in separation? Because we're here in a separate body. That's how we know we believe in separation. And most people wouldn't argue. They're like, yeah, I'm separate from you. We're not connected. Like, it's clear. So the lower realms of 3D are what is winning at this time. But we are going through the ascension process, and this is an elevation of the entire planet's frequency. And this is what Jesus is talking about when he refers to the end of a spiritual season, that we are in the end of a spiritual season. And what he means by that is that we have had many, many incarnations, and that this particular incarnation is a place where we have the opportunity to undo a lot of the things that we have not yet been able to fix in other incarnations. So he said a lot of our lives currently can be quite difficult because we're sort of loading all our forgiveness practice in this incarnation. And that is why the earth looks so tumultuous right now, why society looks so crazy, and having experiences like COVID, which are just like these wild experiences that nobody ever could have predicted, that we are actually being given the opportunity to practice forgiveness on so many levels right now. What was the question again? I forget.
Oh, so somebody just wanted to know about, as you become more awakened, does it make you not want to listen or watch, murder shows or, yeah.
What happens for me now, and I'll just talk about my own experience, is I've always had zero tolerance for anything that has any evil or darkness in it in terms of possession or anything like that. From the time I was a teenage girl, I was I had an innate aspect of myself that would never watch anything like that. And I believe actually that that was in some ways preparing me for this work, that I couldn't have the idea of evil in my mind in no images or anything like that. I couldn't. So what will happen for me now is that I'm a super creative person. So a lot of my entertainment is watching creative things, and I do a lot of creative things. I'm a painter and a potter and that kind of thing, and a channeler. Obviously, it's really creative. But I will sometimes think, oh, I want to watch a movie, and I'll turn it on, and within 2 minutes, I'm like, no, I can't. So often, what will happen with me is I'll have to watch movies from the 80s or the 90s before this extreme violence and stuff was in everything. You know, sometimes a movie within 2 minutes. I remember thinking, oh, everyone's talking about a Game of Thrones. I'm gonna see if I can watch it. Well, I got about 2 minutes in, and some guy was decapitated and disemboweled. I'm like, can't do it. And I can't do it because I know what the real consequences of it are. If I let those images, and what Jesus says is, if you watch death, you want death. He says, if you watch war, you want war. And that allowing those images and ideas into your mind will mean that you will actually create something that will match it. Now, if you watch a murder show, you're not going to get murdered, probably, but you're going to have a lower frequency. It's doing the opposite of what the Course is doing. The Course, through the lessons, is taking you higher and higher, closer to love. And watching that kind of show is taking you lower and lower. And initially, if you're new to A Course in Miracles, you're going to want to watch all the shows you've watched, whether those are police shows or hospital emergency shows or murder mysteries. You're going to want to watch those things. But if you actually think about it, is why do I want to watch a show about death? Why do I want to watch a show about infidelity? Why do I want to watch? These are all food for the ego, and the ego causes suffering. If you strengthen the ego, your frequency goes down and you start to suffer. So it's not a matter of being better or worse. It's a matter of going, the closer I am to love, the better everything is going to be. And the further away from love I go, the worse everything is going to be. So if you've got an unhappy life and you're spending your time watching destructive, murderous, violent shows, they may be related. And so it's just something for people to think about. Now, if you watch a movie and there's a car chase and someone shoots someone, it's probably not the end of the world. But for a lot of people, they're watching this kind of stuff all the time. Throw in some news shows about the Ukrainian war and Gaza and who hates who in the political realm, and you've got hatred and war and death. And this is not what you want to fill your mind with. And Jesus says, if you're watching it, you want it. Why are you watching it if you don't want it? And it's just something to think about. So when Ananda first came through, my favorite show was Dexter. And as soon as they came through, they asked me to stop watching it. It's a story about a serial killer.
Right.
Okay. You know, and I was a Course student. I was reading the Course and watching Dexter. But when Ananda came through, they're like, can't do that. Stop it. And we had our first fight over that, actually.
Oh, so you fight with Ananda?
I don't now.
Or you did?
I did. Well, you can imagine when this spiritual guide starts communicating with you and they tell you can't watch your favorite show, you're just like, well, hang on a second. I can't eat chips. I can't drink wine. And you don't want me to watch Dexter? Like, who's in charge here? So yeah, we had a few hiccups in the beginning.
So I want to ask a really important question, and then we have another very good question about Jesus.
Okay.
But so in my experience, I remember it seems that most people don't know that they are their thoughts. They don't know the difference between the thoughts and the ego versus the spirit.
Yeah.
And I remember when I finally was able to see the difference. And so that helped me to know who am I going to listen to.
Yeah.
And so for me, the ego almost always made me feel bad.
Yeah.
So if I ever felt bad or just something wasn't right with whatever I was thinking, or that's how I learned it was the ego.
Yeah.
And spirit always made me feel love and good and tingles. What would you say?
I think that's a good way of doing it, except when you have very powerful conditioning programs, you will want to follow the conditioning programs. So, for example, if you were punished a lot as a kid for not eating your dinner, you're the kind of adult who it will feel better for you to clear your plate than not clear your plate. You will actually feel some distress when you start to break those conditioning rules. So that's something to think about as well, because sometimes conforming to conditioning actually feels easier than following spiritual guidance. So
Right.
it's kind of what you're saying is true. Generally, conditioning programs will make you feel worse, or the ego will make you feel worse and spirit will make you feel better. But because we're highly conditioned in our society, we will want to conform to our conditioning programs. So the other way that I look at it, for example, this is an example that Jesus or Ananda has used. They said, for example, you'll get the feeling to go for a walk, and you'll be like, oh, I'm going to go for a walk. Back's tired, and yeah, I'm going to go for a walk. And then you'll look outside, and it'll be raining, and you think, oh, it's raining. So you'll have that feeling of upliftment. I want to go for a walk. And then you'll have the conditioning program. Oh, it's raining. In our society, generally speaking, people don't walk in the rain. So you feel the upliftment of inspiration. Let's say I want to go for a walk. And then you'll feel pardon the pun, the wet blanket of conditioning. Oh, it's raining. So that's a really good way of feeling into what the restrictive and judgmental ideas of the ego feel like versus the spirit. Very, very simple thing. So someone who's a course student might go, I still want to go for a walk. I'm going to override that conditioning program of we don't walk in the rain. So for another example of it might be your partner says, my brother's invited us over for dinner on Friday night. We're going to go. And then you go, oh, shit, I don't want to go. You really don't want to go. And then you're like, oh, okay, I'll go. So what's happening there is the same thing. Your instant response, you don't want to go. And if you were honest and truthful, you'd say, I don't want to go. That's not going to work for me. But we're conditioned into being polite. We're conditioned into behaving in ways socially sometimes that aren't what we always want to do. And so your guidance was, I don't want to go. But your conditioning program overrode it and said, oh, yeah. So the way I look at it is conditioning usually restricts you in some way, controls you in some way, makes you feel not great in some way. Guidance is uplifting. You know exactly how you feel. It's curiosity, it's interest, it's excitement. You don't feel excited when a social structure forces you to do something. You don't feel excited. You don't feel right. The thing is, for most of us, we were conditioned out of listening to guidance through our families, through our religions, and through our schooling. So we actually have 20 or 30 years of conditioning, programming active in us that is misguiding us and that we're listening to over and above our desire for freedom, self-expression, creativity, these kinds of things. So it's a process. So the best way for someone to learn is to actually, when they have a question, is how do I really feel? What would if I didn't have to answer to anybody else or anything else, what would I do? And that's your guidance. That's how you know what you would do. Start adding other people and other situations in, then you're like, oh, I don't want to go, but I guess I should because they'll be mad at me if I don't. That's how you get off track. So really it's going down to that simple, basic, how do I feel? am I in a situation where I can express my true feelings? Can I start making decisions that are more in alignment with my true guidance, which is how you really feel, rather than the guidance of all of these other kind of structures and obligations? And for a lot of people, they are surrounded by people and situations and obligations that they feel prevent them from being free, but you are always free. You're a free being. You can begin to. So one of the things I'll say is your life right now is based on the last 1,000 decisions you made. If you don't like your life right now, start changing the next 1,000 decisions, and you will know which decision to make by how you feel.
Right. And, Don Miguel Ruiz, do you know who he is? The Four Agreements?
Oh, yeah, yep. Yeah,
Yeah, in fact, you remember in the beginning, he says that like 90-something% of what you think you know, you didn't ever learn it. It was just your parents told you,
Yep.
society told you, and
Yep.
that's what you think you know. And then the course, the workbook lessons, the first 6 months, that's what they attempt to do, right? To
Yep.
undo what you think you know so that you can reprogram your thoughts. Is that correct? Or what would you say?
I think sometimes we come to the course at a point in our life when we have to admit we don't know, because stuff is not working. And that means that we actually become teachable. And I think that most people are not that teachable until they come to that place where they're like, you know what? I've done everything I've been told to do, everything that I was taught to do, and I'm not happy. There has to be more. And then we become teachable. So I think there's a certain humility that kind of initiates the process of the course. And it can be something like a near-death experience, can be that humbling experience where you can't do anything because you're in hospital for 6 months. And that actually is when you start to reassess your life and what got you there, right? I think the course is a big challenge in that way, because often people who have a very strong ego can be quite successful in the world. So it's more that internal journey, that are you happy? Are you living the way you want to live?
Right.
I'm sure there are many people who live in very nice houses and drive nice cars and have lovely clothes and well-paying jobs. And if you actually ask them what they'd like, they're like, I'd love to live in a cottage in the country, but I don't know how to do it. This isn't what I want, right? But often we actually don't get to that point of self-understanding until we're in our 40s or 50s.
Yeah.
It wasn't until I was in my mid-40s that I actually started to really comprehend that I didn't know what I was doing.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap up. This has been so
Yep.
wonderful, and I know you and I could talk forever.
Yeah.
So we'll have to do more. But I do want these two questions. So
Okay.
one is the person wants to know, how are you doing with your sister with the forgiveness work?
Oh, okay. Well, that's a very interesting story. So I actually believe that she was guided to buy The Course in Miracles, because she bought it and threw it across the car and said, you should read this. She actually said, I don't know why I bought this. Maybe you should read it. My sister has ended up in the psych ward 3 times in the last 3 years. And she's never done the course. She's forbidden me to tell her, because she'd have troubles and I'd be like, you should do the course. She's like, don't ever tell me that. I believe that her mind actually has kind of become broken by constantly indulging her ego and all the things that she gets up to. She no longer resides in my mind. So I feel that my forgiveness practice is complete for me. She's very resentful of me. She badmouths me all the time. She threatened to go on the internet and ruin me by telling stories about me or whatever. So I have come to a place, we actually don't communicate. But when she started to break down mentally, and I was involved in her first mental breakdown, I realized that much of the conflict that we had was, in fact, mental illness on her part. So it's sort of untreated mental illness. I actually believe that if she had started doing the course 22 years ago when she bought the course, that this would not have happened. So it's been a process of forgiveness, very intense forgiveness practice. It's been a process of acceptance that this is what she has chosen for herself. But she is not in a state where I can have a reasonable relationship with her because of her mental illness at this time. So it's a very sad kind of outcome, but I also know that I don't know what she's here to learn. I don't know what the future holds for her. All I know is that with the mental health issues that she has, it's impossible for me to have a regular relationship with her right now.
Right. And the course, forgiveness in the course is not about, it doesn't mean like, keep putting up with that stuff or anything.
No.
It just means allow and accept like you've done, but it doesn't mean you have to have communication with the person either.
No, and the way I look at it is that I have peace around it now. So that means that my side of the work is done. I can't force her into doing anything, and I can't change her mind for her.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the final question is about let me find it. So it was about Jesus. I don't know where it went, but I'm going to summarize that he basically talked about Jesus on the crucifix and how horrific that was and so forth. What is the message of on the cross, the crucifixion, versus what A Course in Miracles would believe?
So the story about the crucifixion from the religious point of view is that God sacrificed his only son for our sins, and that he suffered for us, which I've always found completely illogical and have never understood when people say that. What he says in the Course is that the crucifixion proved the valuelessness of his body as far as he was concerned. And that he actually goes into it in quite a lot of detail in his autobiography, where he said that it was time for him to leave the disciples because they were becoming so reliant on him, and that he, through the enlightenment process that he experienced, his work on earth was done essentially, and that the resurrection is what is to be focused on, because the death of the body is nothing. It's nothing to him. That spirit is everything, and that he actually, by the time this happened, he had mastery over the physical material world and could work miracles, and he recreated a physical body. And that's what we are actually doing all the time. With our own minds, we are manufacturing our own bodies. So he says, you're doing it unconsciously. He did it consciously. But the crucifixion itself was to prove the valuelessness of the body, and that no matter what anybody did to you, that you could forgive them. And that he gave you the most extreme example of what someone could do to you, and he could still forgive them. So whatever your issue is, you can forgive that person. So it's a kind of a different message completely from what the church would teach, that you're a sinner and he died for your sin and God sacrificed his only son, and that the crucifixion was the most important thing. And the fact Jesus in the Course says that no, he could have evaded the crucifixion at any point had he chosen to. He chose to go through with it as a teaching device for his disciples. It was not a teaching device for everybody at that time. It was at that time for his disciples, so that they could actually see what his teachings could allow him to do, go through this horrific death and create a new body when he chose to. So the old body was not resurrected. He actually created a new body. So the crucifixion is not the most important thing, the resurrection is. And the crucifixion was to show the valuelessness of his body. So the Course tells us we are not our bodies, we are the spirit that animates the body. And that when you die, quote unquote, you actually just step out of this vehicle that you don't need anymore. And that's all. You don't die. Of course, those people who've had near-death experiences know that the body is nothing. And I always am amazed that people who have near-death experiences look back on the body and they don't even recognize it as themselves because it is not who they are. And
Right.
that's what Jesus was actually teaching, that he was not his body.
And one final question. I could keep going, but I want to ask this one too. So when he said, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," what do you think that message was when he was saying that?
Well, they were killing an innocent person who hadn't done anything wrong, and they were basically, he was practicing forgiveness, right?
But also, yeah. So in relation with the Course, so my understanding is, or the way that I've looked at it, is they literally didn't know what they were doing. Like they were completely unconscious
Yeah,
of what they were doing.
yeah,
And those of us, me, that was another message after my NDE, is that I was taking everything personal, as if
Yeah.
it had something to do with me.
yeah.
And what I gather he was saying is they don't know what they're doing. They're not doing it to me or to, they're just in fear.
Yeah, forgive them for they know not what they do. I mean, it's any person who is cruel and murderous is completely lost and separated from love, right? So they don't know what they're doing. They're completely unconscious. But I think it's the lesson in it is, the same with anybody that you encounter or that I encounter that do something. Now, it's not always easy in the moment to practice forgiveness. Obviously, we react and we hate when people are mean to us. But that's kind of the practice of forgiveness. So for example, in that story about my sister, where I was taking all of the things that she was doing personally, and that she was being hateful to me or she was being crazy or whatever, and this was why we had this very volatile relationship, I was gifted with the knowledge that her brain wasn't working properly. And that was a kind of a perfect example. I was taking it all personally, but she didn't know what she was doing.
Right.
It was the same situation, right? If she said something hateful or she was behaving erratically or being mean or whatever, I was taking it personally, and that's just a lesser form of the attack, right?
Right.
He was getting the ultimate attack, which is death through a horrible experience. But that's kind of what he says. He goes, you don't need to crucify yourself, just like forgive people, and you don't need to suffer. So that's really the lesson that he wants us to get from the crucifixion and the resurrection is stop crucifying yourself and other people, and forgive, and then you'll be born again. And that's that whole phrase of being born again, right? When you start to practice what he teaches, then you are born again. You become a different kind of person.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Tina. This has just been wonderful, and we're going to have to do it again for sure.
Well, thank you.
And
It's been really lovely to have the time to talk about all these things. So often I'm doing things in little snippets here and there, but it's kind of neat to have a sort of a comprehensive storyline.
yeah. So is there any last words that you would like to share with anyone, with the group?
Well, I have a YouTube channel called Channeling Jesus and Ananda, and there's about 700 or 800 videos on there that you can watch for free. I've done 365 videos for each lesson of the Course in Miracles, and then I've channeled Jesus commentary on the lesson. So if you haven't done the lessons or you have struggled with the lessons, that's a great companion to the Course text, is to watch those videos. But there's tons of other videos. There's videos about the crucifixion. There's videos about all kinds of things, the body, hundreds and hundreds of videos. So they're all free. I do have a community online that is a subscription community, and I do two 90-minute channeling sessions every month as part of that. And there's 1,000 videos in the library on that community, and it has a Facebook type feed, and people post about their course experiences. And it's a very comprehensive kind of community for people who are course students and want to get to know people. And of course, through that community, we do offer retreats several times through the year, and many, many lifelong friendships have developed at those retreats. We're hoping to go to the south of France in October, where Jesus and Mary are reportedly to have gone after his resurrection. So that's in the works, but it's a wonderful community. What else? Really, you don't have to suffer. So if you're suffering, get your course out, start to do your forgiveness work, do the lessons, and understand that you are the creator of your experience. There is nothing outside of you that is affecting you. You're not a victim of the world. You are a master creator, and you just haven't been given the user manual for your brain. And I consider the Course in Miracles the user manual to teach you how to use this amazing device that we have been given, this creative. You've been made in the image of the divine. The divine is loving and creative, and we are too. We've just forgotten that we are, and we have to be reminded and retrained. We need to be retrained.
And it's not too late to start the workbook. You know, a lot of people started on January 1st.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
Right, but yeah, like that's like the first ones are easy, so you can, and then go to Tina's YouTube channel for commentary on the lessons if you want.
Yeah.
So anyway, thank you so much, Tina. It's just been
a pleasure, and thank you everyone for joining us. I don't know, I probably know a few of you, some of you from my community, and thank you for joining in this conversation. And yeah, it was wonderful.
Thank you. Have a wonderful night, and thank you, Loretta and David, for helping us. And we will see you all soon.
Okay, bye.
Aloha.